Yay Networks.
Welcome to the Great Girlfriends podcast, where we discuss life, love, laughter, and everything in between. I'm your host, Sybil Amuti, and I can't wait for you to hear all of the Great Girlfriend magic on today's show. So without further ado, grab something great to drink, grab your pen and your paper, and get ready for this week's episode. Enjoy. Great Girlfriends. Okay, I tried not to fangirl, and I did my absolute best, but then when I saw Dr. Laura's face, I started sweating, and Dr. Laura was like, oh, I'm so excited to have one of the most magnificent women on the earth, someone who's so devoted to us being the best version of ourselves, someone who's been very candid and vulnerable in her own journey and her relationship building and her personal story. And I just love and I'm so happy to introduce to you today, Dr. Laura Berman. Hi, Dr. Laura.
Hi. It's good to be here.
Oh, it's so great to have you here. Welcome to the Great Girlfriend community.
I'm thrilled to join you.
You are and have been such a fixture in what people have considered the self-help space, the wellness space, and you have gone on your own personal journey and you continue to evolve in the practices that you learn and you teach and you share. And I want to thank you for that because it has never stopped for you. It's always evolved and been a journey and a bit of a life's migration. Would you say that's accurate?
Sure as hell has. It keeps evolving. But if you're not evolving, you're dying, right? So we're all evolving. I'm just a little more public about it. And for whatever reason, the universe sees fit to give me a lot of experiences that add to my work. That's for sure.
And you know what? I feel like experience, validates, you have proof of concept after you've had a theory. and it's easy for us to theoretically see or imagine things or solutions as tactical ways that we can approach life and ways we can do things different. And then comes the trial. And then you have to really decide in the moment, choose which route am I going to take here?
Yeah. And how am I going to move? Yeah. And I've been really committed, I think, my entire life, but certainly in my adult life, it's all about, that's just the way I'm made, healing, learning, and teaching. So everything, I was just saying the other day, okay, I've had enough experiences now, I don't need to experience anything else to be able to heal, learn, and teach. And I don't think you have to, but I certainly have found that each time I go through one of these, AFGEs, I call them another freaking growth experience, these trials and tribulations, it definitely does add deeper and deeper layers to the work I do in the world. But, that doesn't mean that anyone who's doing work in the world has to go through a lot of trials and tribulations. It just seems to be what I signed up for, but I'm ready to be done with that. I don't need more.
You're like, I don't need to grow any taller in this area.
Yeah. I can grow without those AFGEs. I think.
I love that. AFGEs. I love that. Well, Great Girlfriends, if by now you've not learned or been just one of the beneficiaries of Dr. Laura's work, I want to share with you that she is a leading expert in the field of sex. Ooh, Dr. Laura! And relationship therapy. She's a New York Times bestselling author of many books, including her latest, Quantum Love, and she's an award-winning radio host and has her own podcast, The Language of Love. Dr. Berman previously hosted her own program, In the Bedroom, with Dr. Laura Berman on the OWN network. And she is a popular television personality who makes regular appearances on daytime television shows like The Rachael Ray Show, The Dr. Oz Show, Today, Good Morning America, and many more. She's a frequent contributor to women's magazines like Cosmo, Glamour, and more. She is married and a mother of 3 sons and 2 really, really cute dogs as well. So, Dr. Laura, did little girl Laura see this big life? What did she see?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I've always been a bit of a ham and a performer by nature. So maybe from that, I knew I was going to be I knew I was going to be a therapist as soon as I knew what a therapist was.
Wow.
But that was probably because I was my family's therapist from the time, I could communicate. And probably before that. But No, it all just sort of evolved. The one thing, I mean, my parents were wonderful people, they, with the best intentions, like most of us, they did a lot of things wrong.
Yeah.
But they also did a lot of things right. And one of the things they
Mhm.
did right, I feel, which was one of the greatest gifts they gave me, was to just constantly drill into me. If you do what you love, success will come. Like, don't do it backwards. Don't think
Mm.
about what's going to make you successful or what's going to get you paid or whatever. And like, just you
Mhm.
have to love what you do. Just do what you love and you'll be fine. And so I really committed to that. And they reminded me of that many times throughout my academic years in college. And as I
Mhm.
was choosing majors and as I was choosing whether I wanted to do graduate school or not. And,
Yeah.
I think that's the key, right? So I never intended, I'm very grateful for the platform I have, but I wasn't setting out to create that platform. I mean, that didn't even really exist 30 years ago when I
Right.
was getting started, right? Today, my
Yeah.
16-year-old, if I ask him what he wants to do, he's like, be famous. I'm like, be famous doing what? Like,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. Something I'll just be, because now because
Yeah.
of social media, they have a different take on it. But that was never my intention per se.
Wow. So, one of the questions that I've thought for many years and wanted to ask every person who's in this category is, how do you become a sex expert? How do you
um,
I have
there's
ideas, but I
lots of
want you
there's
to tell
lots
me.
of ways. There are lots of ways to
Okay.
become a sex expert, I'm sure.
Okay.
My path, I sort of stumbled upon, because I grew up in a family that was really open about the topic,
Mhm.
and it was not something, for good or for bad, right? But it wasn't something that anyone in my family shied away from or was
Yeah.
taboo. It was really natural and normal to talk about it, to address issues around it, to ask questions about it. And so when I was doing I set out to be a general couples therapist, which is
Mhm.
what I am primarily. But very early in graduate school, as I was doing my, field placements, you see your own clients with the supervision of trained clinicians who kind of supervise your cases. And all of my cases, sexual issues were coming up in these relationships. And when I would
Mhm.
bring them to my supervisor would look at me like I had three heads or some sort of perv. Like, why are these people bringing up these issues? And half the time
Yeah.
I wasn't even asking them. I eventually realized that people sense when you're open to that, right? But it
Mhm.
it it was
Mhm.
shocking to me that the relationship therapy training I was getting and education I was getting was not intentionally addressing sexuality. Because how can you be a
Yeah.
couples therapist or a relationship
Got
therapist
it.
without
That's right.
addressing sex? And it still astounds me
Right.
how many couples therapists don't touch sex, and quite frankly, how many
Mhm.
sex therapists don't address anything else going on in the relationship. And
Mhm.
both of those are
Mhm.
crazy to me. So
Mhm.
I actually I just set about to get my own training. I went into a fellowship program and got a master's just because I felt like I couldn't be a good couples therapist without really understanding how sex therapy worked into that. And so I
Mm.
never
Mhm.
set off to be known for sex therapy per se,
Mhm.
but that's what happened because at the time, especially, there were so few people talking about it or doing that kind of
Mhm.
work.
Mhm, mhm. And I think when you amplify certain messaging and it really does sit above the crowd, it does really position you to answer those big questions that every couple faces. I mean, women face, couple or not, just questions that we have about use of our body and what feels
Yeah.
passionate and what doesn't, and are there levels to this and how to relate, And I think I've learned, Dr. Laura, and I'm now in my mid 40s. And
Mhm.
I've learned that everything in my life and your life and our lives is centered around the way we relate with ourselves and then how we are allowed to do that with other people. So if we don't see relationship strategy as a skill set, I think we sort of miss the opportunity to really optimize how we connect with one another. And sex is a big part of that in marriage. And it doesn't just start in the bed though. Like you say,
Mm.
it's so much of that happens in your mind before you even get dressed for the day and want to feel things and give yourself permission to feel. I've
Yeah.
learned and I've now seen that so many women are withholding passion from themselves. Even in this community, I see a theme or thread of women being resistant to passion for feeling like they have to earn the freedom to be, to be passionate and to be loving and to be connected even with themselves. Is that something you see a lot in your practice?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a fun you're absolutely right that everything, even when we're having a relationship with someone else, a partner or a loved one, any relationship we have, we're having a relationship with ourselves through that other
Yeah.
person. That's what's
That's right.
happening.
Yeah.
You're actually relating to yourself through the relationship with that other person. So the most important thing, both for your relationship life, your love life, your friend life, even your work life, and certainly your sex life, is the relationship you have with yourself. If you
Mhm.
can't love and honor your own body, you can't expect anyone else to. If you don't know what
Yeah.
pleases you sexually, and that will change over time based on hormones and
Mhm.
blood flow and experiences and whatever,
Schedule.
schedule,
Yes.
right? If you don't honor that for yourself and understand what you need at different ages and phases and stages and seasons of your life, you can't expect anyone else to. And what I see, I think the way that we're socialized, most of us, is that it's very taboo. There's no overt education other than all the scary things that can happen to you and how not to get an STD or get pregnant or get raped,
Mhm.
right? Like that's the kind of
Yeah.
education we get about what not to have happen to us or with us, but we don't
Mhm.
get educated around owning our own pleasure or owning our own power sexually or sensually. We don't
Mhm.
we aren't even present in our bodies.
Yeah.
There's a lot of self-consciousness and stories around what's okay and not okay, and that, if not questioned and challenged and explored, can take over everything.
Mhm, mhm. I love that. I think about this a lot because I now have children who are 13 and 10.
Mhm.
And, I think in my own upbringing, everything was do not have
Yeah,
sex, do not,
yeah,
yeah, all the don'ts, right? So when it came time to be free to do, I was like, oh God, how do I
yeah.
liberate myself, because I've been conditioned to not to be restricted in this area and to feel
That's
like
such
it
a
was
good
such a
point.
right? And so then I grew up and become an adult and it's time for me to be free. And I don't
And
really
you
know
gotta
what that
flip that
means.
switch, and you're like, "What the hell is that?" Right? You've been
Yeah,
repressed,
yeah,
repressed,
yeah,
repressed. It's scary, it's bad, it's dirty. Okay, now you have a ring on your finger. Turn on the light switch, and you're
yeah,
supposed to somehow turn all of that off.
yeah, yeah.
And that's one of my biggest issues with a lot of sex education, especially in like traditionally religious communities that use a
Hmm.
lot of shame and fear. And I
Yeah,
get the good intentions. They're trying to keep kids safe. They think they're going to keep them safe by scaring and shaming them. But
yeah.
shame is the crappiest motivator there is.
Oh
And
my
it
gosh.
has far reaching consequences. You can't just turn that off when it's
Yeah.
time not to feel shame anymore. You have to work
Hmm.
on releasing that shame. And that's been a lot of the work that I've done with women through the years and with couples, but
Hmm.
especially with women, um, is helping them understand the birthright that their pleasure
Hmm.
is and how to. I mean, that was one of the books I wrote, of talking to your kids about sex, how to raise children who are sexually healthy, meaning also that they make smart decisions, but that they make
Yeah.
those decisions from a place of empowerment.
Yeah, pleasure as a birthright is such a foreign concept to most of us.
Mhm. It
Most of
is.
us have this merit-based mindset that you have to earn pleasure, that you earn freedom. Even the idea just recently, and I thought about this as I said it. I was talking to a friend about vacation, and I said I took vacation, and I'm like, why did I take it? I have the right. It's like I had to snatch
Yeah,
time from something, from a place where it belonged, elsewhere. Maybe I snatched it from work or I snatched it from response. Taking vacation, like I committed to personal time. It doesn't mean,
yeah.
and even the concept of taking it. So it's like
Mhm.
all this merit based, performance based living where we have
Yeah,
to earn everything, anything that feels good or feels decent to us. And now we're reverse
yeah.
engineering self care, and we're
Yeah,
like,
you're absolutely right. And once you
yeah,
start doing it, once you start taking care of yourself that way and making that, we're also taught that it's selfish to take care
yeah,
of yourself or take time for yourself or to not put yourself, at the bottom of the totem pole of everyone else and everything else you're taking care of. And, it's so backwards
yeah,
because you're not being selfish, you're being self-full. We only have a certain
yeah.
reservoir of energy. And if you aren't constantly nurturing and filling that up, you really are giving from an empty tank. And, it
Mhm.
took me a long time to learn this too. It wasn't until I literally had no choice because, I was in so much pain and grief and loss that I literally could not do or say yes to anything that, I didn't have what I call a full body yes to. Like if I didn't
Mm.
care who I was disappointing, including my children or my husband. I didn't care who I was pissing off. There was just like no other choice. And
Yes.
that the most profound thing I learned through that process is that that is how I'm committed to living, period.
Mm.
And
Mhm.
as long as I live that way, everything works out. And I don't, the people that I
Right.
piss off are rare. And if I do, it's kind of irrelevant. But
Yeah,
people take it much better than I would have ever
yeah.
thought a few years ago, in my
Mhm.
people pleasing self. And it's led
Mhm.
to so much more energy and so much more joy and so much more that I have to give when I live that
Mhm.
way. But it's a really scary leap because it's completely opposite of how we've been
So
taught to be or what we've been taught a good person does or a kind person does or a giving person does. But what we
yeah.
don't realize is that we can give and care so much more when we make ourselves the priority, when we are self-full. It's not selfish, it's self-full.
Mhm.
And I don't mean full of yourself, I mean full tank.
Yes, full tank. Before we go further, I want to grab a word from our sponsors. Hey, great girlfriends. Listen, managing the Great Girlfriends podcast community and family and work is keeping me pretty busy. At the end of what can feel like an endless workday, the last thing I want to do is cook dinner. But when your fridge is empty, that urge to order in and skip the cooking happens all too often. Thanks to Daily Harvest, I don't have that takeout temptation anymore. Daily Harvest helps me keep my freezer fully stocked with options that are delivered right to my door and are so delicious, nourishing, and ready in minutes. Daily Harvest delivers delicious harvest bowls, soups, flatbreads, snacks, smoothies, lattes, and more, built on organic fruits and vegetables, which happen to be extremely yummy. Daily Harvest has delicious options for any time of day, such as breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and dessert. Everything is always on hand in your freezer and ready to enjoy when you need it, such as my personal favorite, which is the strawberry peach smoothie. And I could go on and on about that, but it's for you to taste on your own. So avoid the takeout temptation and get Daily Harvest. Go to dailyharvest.com/great girlfriends to get up to $40 off of your first box. That's dailyharvest.com/great girlfriends for up to $40 off your first box. Dailyharvest.com/great girlfriends. Okay, so let's jump into quantum love and atomic energy. Define atomic energy for us, Dr. Laura.
Okay. Well, so here's the thing that most people don't understand. And the reason the book that I wrote called Quantum Love is all about this is that we seem solid, the table, the places around us seem solid. We
Mhm,
seem separate from one another, whether we're across the
mhm.
country or standing next to each other. But on an atomic level, meaning if you were to look at, we're all atom. Everything is made
Yeah,
up of atoms, right? So that's what I
right.
mean on an atomic level, right? So
Mhm,
on the level of atoms or on an atomic level, we are all just pure vibration, pure vibrating atoms.
mhm,
I am, you am, are, this table, the shelves, everything around us, everything we see and perceive is comprised, made up of atoms that are vibrating at different speeds and frequencies. And what has been developed and discovered, I would say, really only the past 100 years. It was toward the end of Einstein's life is the field of quantum physics. Once they got strong enough, microscopes that could look, atomic microscopes that could look at that teeny tiny level of things.
Mhm.
All of these amazing discoveries have continued to be made about the fact that, in fact, we are all connected. There is it
Yeah.
seems like we're separate from our five senses point of view, right? But in
Yeah.
reality, if we were looking at each other through an atomic microscope, we would see that my atoms and your atoms and the atoms of everything else around us are actually all part of the same soup of atoms.
Yeah.
The thing that
Yeah.
separates us is how those atoms are vibrating. So, for instance, a table, those atoms are vibrating much more slowly
Mhm.
than you or I are, right? And
Mhm.
our frequency is what we call it. The frequency is made up of the speed and the intensity of that vibration and of our bodies. Literally, the body is made of atoms. We're all
Mhm.
atoms vibrating together
Mhm.
at the same speed and frequency. And that is
Mhm.
constantly, this is what's been so cool. That vibration is constantly shifting and changing, constantly.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
main thing that shifts and changes it are two main things. One is how we feel
Mhm.
emotionally changes,
Jeez, yes.
and and
Uh-huh.
how easily we let ourselves, what's called, entrain to the energy around us. Because
Mm.
what we know now is that we're all like, how if you take two tuning forks and you strike
Mhm.
one, the other
Mhm.
immediately takes on the same tone. Have you ever seen
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Two tuning forks.
Yeah.
That's literally what we do. That's called
Uh-huh.
entrainment, vibrational entrainment. One tuning fork immediately entrains to the other. So when you walk into a room, if you're not, what most of us do when we're not conscious of this, is that our energy immediately matches everyone else around us, especially if we tend to be on the more codependent side, like I am as a
Yeah.
recovering codependent. So we're constantly matching everyone else's energy. That's what they mean when they say, oh, your bad mood is contagious, right? Or even
Mhm. Mhm.
on an atomic level, when you walk into the house and your partner's in a bad mood before you even see them, right?
Yeah.
Or there
Yeah.
was this really cool study at the University of Washington where they took couples in a loving relationship, because people in loving relationships are the most entrained to one another. They took
Mhm.
one to one side of the building and put them in a brain scanner, and the other to another side of the building and shined a light in their eye. And the ocular receptors in the brain of the other person across the building lit up. The receptor. So
What?
yes, and our heart
Wow.
rates synchronized. There's so much cool science
Yeah.
to back this up. But the bottom line and the takeaway is that, especially in loving relationships, but in anything you want to create in your life, the vibration that your body is holding is everything. So, what I discovered through one of my intense AFGEs and what led to
Mhm.
quantum love is
Uh-huh.
that when I harness my body's energy, and I get really, really clear on how I want to feel, not how I currently am feeling, but how I want to feel. And I
Mhm.
allow myself to move my body, and I have a whole system for doing this, to move my body into that frequency, right? And I match that
Mhm.
with an intention, whether it's that I want all of my kids to sit down for dinner, or I'm about to have a difficult conversation with my husband, or I'm about to walk into a business meeting or whatever. I get really
Mhm.
clear on what I want to happen, how I would feel when that happens. And I
Mhm.
move my body into that frequency and hold that vision, and then that's what happens. That's the science behind what they call the
Wow.
law of attraction or the secret.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
actually what manifesting is
Got
harnessing
it.
our atomic energy.
Mhm. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. So when we speak and hear about intentionality, we now understand the science behind what makes it real, how to actualize it. So now we see that likewise, when you have no intentionality, you're subject to the intentionality of others. Is that true?
Yeah,
Is that
you
safe
just
to
if you're
say?
not conscious about what you're creating, I mean, the bottom line is that we're always manifesting. We are
Yes.
always manifesting unconsciously, usually,
Mhm.
right? But everything that is
Mhm.
happening in your life, that doesn't mean it's your fault, right? But you are
Mhm. Mhm.
manifesting it, everything.
Mhm.
Nothing, this is why quantum physicists, when they do experiments, actually have to leave the room, like do it in a vacuum,
Mm.
because what they have
Mhm.
found is the scientists' expectations or beliefs about how that experiment is going to turn out, because it's operating on the atomic level,
Mhm.
impacts how it's going to turn out. So the scientist has to
Wow.
actually get out of the way
Yeah.
so that
Yeah.
the experiment can actually occur, right? That's how
Yeah.
powerful we are. And so what I try to teach each other, that's interesting. What I try to teach people,
Uh-huh.
actually, I have a manifestation Mondays club that I do the first Monday of every month. So I'll give my website at
Oh,
the end, but
wow.
if you go to my
Okay.
website, you can sign up, where I teach a lot of these. And it's a beautiful community of people who come together, and we meet halfway through the month to troubleshoot. But I try to help people understand that we have so much more power than we can imagine. And when you get really, really, it takes the audacity to dream, right? You have to be willing
Mhm.
to dream into the smallest things, like how you want your
Yeah.
day to go, or how you want your partner to show up, to, the latest thing I'm manifesting is a hobby farm. I'm just like
Mhm.
obsessed. I
Wow.
gotta be in nature and grow vegetables. Like, that is something that has just come up over the past year that I'm really clear
Mhm.
on. And
Mhm.
and so when you go into that dreaming state and you allow, this is the key. So, like, how they say, write yourself a check for $1 million, and that's how
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
yeah. The reason that
Yeah.
doesn't work for a lot of people,
I love this. You're like, "This is why it's not working for
this is
you?"
why it
Well,
doesn't
yes,
work.
let's go.
Okay,
Uh-huh.
is
Uh-huh.
because you write the check, and that's part of it, right? The
Yeah.
visualization, but you're not
Yeah.
moving your body into the frequency of he or
Mhm.
she who has $1 million right now in the bank, right? You're
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
thinking, okay, here's my check for $1 million, universe, give it to me. And crap, how am I going to pay the bills? Oh shit,
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm going to do. You're still in that
Yeah.
place of scarcity, which is natural, right? Because we all are going to
Mhm.
get triggered by things. But the key to manifesting that $1 million or that love or that whatever is matching your body's energetic frequency with that which you want to create. So, using that check as an
Mhm.
example, you would be spending time on a regular basis. And this is the key to moving your body into that state, is that you have to imagine yourself there, like in the bank, or looking at your bank balance with $1 million
Mhm.
in it, or in your mansion in the sky, or whatever it is, as if it were happening right here, right now, in this now moment, in first
Mhm.
person. So you don't see yourself out there in the mansion or flying your helicopter or whatever it is. You can look
Mhm.
down and see your hands holding the controls, or look down at, you're literally there
Mhm.
in your imagination, as if it's
Mhm.
happening right here, right now, in first person. And what that does, this is the science too, is that your body and your brain don't know the difference between reality and rehearsal. So when you
Mhm.
imagine that in first person, it moves your body into that frequency. And you can feel
Mm.
this when you practice it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I teach a lot of these techniques in the course. And if you go to my website, there are meditations to guide you through feeling what this kind of, what I call home frequency, this manifesting frequency, really feels like. But it
Mhm.
really works.
Mhm. Mhm. So this is so good because I'm sitting here like, yeah, it works, and it absolutely, and I understand it in a way because I think about, when I think about relationships, let's go romantic relationships,
Mhm.
and I think about all the ways that if my husband and I are not on one accord, the house is a shipwreck. It just is. And
Mhm.
if we if we don't meet, it's not even it's not always that we want to come in and we just want to have togetherness because we're you're people can be funky people, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you're just but we understand that if we don't set the intention to put our marriage where we want it to be, it won't get there. So I'm starting to think through all the ways, and we have been taught to mirror and match in behaviors. Okay, so yeah, so that for us has been a pattern of how we help to
Mhm.
really meet each other in the middle and build from there, from our high to get to our highest point of potential. But now I'm also hearing and imagining that there's more to it, which
Oh,
comes
there's so
down
much
to
more.
yeah,
It's like a
yeah.
jet I swear to God, it's a Jedi mind trick for your relationship. Because I can tell you
Yeah.
this is why what led to my book, To Quantum Love, because
Mhm.
I kind of stumbled upon this when I was going through my own dark night of the soul and really trying to support my children. And I write about this in the book. That's how it started.
Mhm.
And then once I was astounded and I stumbled upon this and I was like, oh my God,
Mm.
what is this? I have to understand the science
Yeah.
behind it because I was not what you would call a woo-woo person. Now I'm a woo-woo person, but back then I wasn't. And then
Uh-huh.
and once it worked so like astoundingly with my children, I kind of went, and looked over at my husband who is so stubborn. And
Mhm.
he's not a lawyer, but he could argue successfully in the Supreme Court for God's sake. I mean, he is so strong-willed and stubborn. And, I'm stubborn too, and it's one of the reasons I fell in love with him, but it's a nightmare when we disagree,
Yeah.
right? Because I can't win an argument to save my life. But
Yes, yes.
but I started using these techniques. Okay, this is what I
Uh-huh.
want to happen as a result of
Mhm.
this conversation, or this is how I want him to show up. And I would get really, really clear on that. I would move my body into that imagining. I would
Mhm.
move my body into what I call that home frequency. And
Mhm.
I would be shocked when this guy
Mhm.
who is like unmovable by anything I say or do when he's got his mind made
Uh-huh.
up would
Uh-huh.
suddenly fall into line. And,
Wow. Yeah.
I was like, you got to use that. I thought to myself, like, I could use this for evil if I wanted to, but I'm going
Right.
to use it for good.
Yeah. Like,
But it's true for the
hmm.
whole family, like anything. I was just saying to your
Yeah.
girlfriend, like none of them wanted to go skiing with me. And my husband has a bad back and it's a pain in the butt to get all the, and no one wanted to go skiing. And I was dying to go skiing. And I was like, okay, here we go, kids, you're going skiing. And so
Yeah.
I like set it all up in my mind and I saw
Yeah.
it and I moved there in home frequent, and I moved my body into that, like what it would feel like to be swishing down the slopes and up eating a snack
Yeah.
at the little cafeteria on the top of the mountain. And it didn't matter where it was. I could go to Aspen or I could go to, the ski hill down the street. Like it didn't matter for me.
Yeah.
I just like wanted to have that experience with them. And literally 3 or 4 days later, my 16-year-old said, hey, maybe we should go to Big Bear. And I was like, okay. And I like set it all up. And within 2 weeks, we were all there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they really
And it
fall in
was their
line.
idea. It was their
Is there?
idea.
Oh,
It
yeah.
wasn't yeah. Which
Oh,
makes
yeah.
it better, right? Because it's not you
Even better.
forcing this whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It
So
really
is
is a
is
Jedi
it
mind
safe
trick.
to say yeah, and is it safe to say that this is why they say you are the reflection or the mirror of the 5 people that you surround yourself with? Is it about this atomic energy and this home frequency that you're landing in the same or similar space and that you're able to vibrate from there? Is that what
Yeah,
that's
you can
about?
all that's part of it. Yeah, because we
Okay.
can only perceive we only have our 5 senses to perceive our
Mhm.
reality, right? That's it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
what they've been able to show is that our brain is actually taking in 40 billion bits of information every
My
millisecond.
God.
But we are only consciously processing 2,000 of them. Because
Wow.
2,000 of the 40 billion bits, because we
Yeah.
are limited by our 5 senses. That's why if you talk
Mhm.
to people who have, had a near-death experience or left their body, they will have trouble even explaining what they perceived because they were beyond their 5 senses, right?
Mhm.
But with
Mhm.
these bodies, we
Mhm.
can only perceive what our 5 senses are capable of perceiving. But there's
Mhm.
so much more going on. And what we know
Yeah.
is that on a atomic level, on a vibration level, we are only capable of perceiving with our 5 senses people, experiences, and items and objects that are vibrating in harmony with ours.
Mhm.
So if
Mm.
that's why when you start to really work on your frequency and build these muscles, a lot of people will just suddenly gently drop off from your life. It's not like they're going to blow up your life. They just kind
Yes.
of gently disappear all of a sudden,
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
organic way. And the only
Yeah.
people, if you want to know, how you're vibrating, look at the people around you. And in fact, I just made a
Mhm.
video about this on social media. Look at your social media explore page if you want to see where your energy is focused,
Ooh.
because that is
Wait,
a
Dr.
really
Laura, mine is all male inspiration. I don't like that.
okay. Well, pay attention. Mine are all babies, kittens, and hobby farms,
Yeah.
right? But where
Yes. Oh my
attention
gosh.
goes, energy flows. And
That's absolutely true.
so you have to be really discerning about where
Yeah.
you put your attention. I literally get my news from my husband. I cannot watch the news
Yeah,
because
I can't
it's
either.
toxic. And he gives me he just gave me the rundown this morning. Like, he gives me the rundown
Yeah.
of the important things that are going on. And if I want to learn more about something that's happening, I'll dive into it myself and my news sources. But I don't like watching the news or consuming that because it's so catastrophic and toxic and everybody has their agenda. And
Yeah.
I feel it constrict anything that
Me
constricts
too.
you or tightens you is
Yeah.
not meant for you. You know, it's
That's
real
so good.
unless you're kind of growing beyond trauma, which of course can
Yeah.
sometimes be constricting. But that's why that full body yes, and being in your body to sense what constricts and creates expansion for you
Mhm.
is so
Mhm.
important, because your body is literally
Wow.
constantly giving you messages.
I just explained this to my mom last night, why she can watch the news, at 11 at night and I could not, because I could never sleep. And my mind, because in my mind, I'm like, how do I help all these people? And
Yeah.
it's just too much pain for me. And it, for me, literally locks me up. And so
Yeah.
I'm not able to, and I'm very, very discerning around what I take in, because I
Yes, you
understand
have to
I'm
be.
hypersensitive to,
And by
other
the way,
people
it's
may not be.
affecting your mother too. She just doesn't know it.
Yes, she doesn't know it.
Attuned
Exactly.
she's not as attuned to it. And
Yeah.
people who are, and you, from what you're saying, I can tell that you're an empath. People who are a little more empathic, meaning they can feel the feelings of other people.
Mhm.
Um,
Completely.
you have to be super discerning about the
Mhm.
people, the situations, and the media you expose yourself to,
Yeah.
especially these days because it's so chaotic. But we're
Mhm.
all being
Mhm.
affected by it. Some of us just aren't
Yeah.
in our bodies, or some of us
Yeah.
just aren't
Yeah.
empaths. And by the way, those of us who are empaths, myself included, it is a gift, and many of us were born this way, but most of us developed these abilities as a coping strategy during our childhood because we had to be really vigilant to keep ourselves
Yes.
safe. And so we had to read, is what does mom need so she won't yell at
Yeah.
me? What does dad need so he won't drink or hit me? So, this is a child's
Yeah.
strategy for surviving in the home. And it's a
Yeah.
gift in the end, but it develops through some trauma, either big T
For
trauma or little
sure.
T trauma. So those of us who aren't empathic, it's not to say that you aren't a good person or that you're somehow out of
Mhm.
touch. It just means that you either didn't have trauma, or you are so disassociated from your body that you're not really home to feel what you're feeling ever.
Wow.
And
That's
so,
good.
yeah.
That's so good. You actually have spoken to my entire healing process, because, as you spoke to the need to really be in certain environments so that I could, I or you or we can relate and we can build upon that and we can really create the right type of home for our emotions. As
Mhm.
I think through all of the years of what has kept and made me healthy has been being very discerning around that, having really clear boundaries, and not even having this. Let me rephrase it. Not necessarily having boundaries as much as I had super high standards, and the standards
Mhm.
created boundaries.
Right.
Because
Standards are
I'm
boundaries.
standards are yeah, and so I didn't necessarily create walls, but I set high expectations for what could be near me.
Mhm.
What was special to me, and the things that did not align really did self-eliminate. And
Yeah.
even in my own way, I go, why are they leaving? Why are people leaving? Why is
Yeah.
this happening? Because I'm a gatherer at heart,
Me
but
too. Right.
everything and everyone is not meant to to be in that proximity. So
No, so
that is
you were naturally at a vibration and choosing to vibrate at that level, which
yeah,
was no longer in harmony with many people.
yeah,
And that happens to
yeah.
all of us as we kind of commit to our worth and the kind of life we want to live. People will
Mhm.
drop off,
Mhm.
and that's just to make room for the new.
That is so good. I want to touch on this, Dr. Laura, because this is very personal to you and to myself and to, our entire world as we went through the pandemic and we all hit this wave of, grief.
Yeah.
And we're all, personally, I lost my father. I know about your son, and
Mhm.
millions of people were lost year after year to COVID and just natural causes, et cetera. And so we also lost connection. We lost normalcy. We lost routine. We lost
Jobs,
so
money,
right,
health.
right. Yes. Like it's just a hovering spirit of grief that has just, hit all of our homes and our families. And a lot of people have not recognized that grief is not just about a life, it's also about experience or expectation and those things. What have become your practices? Because I know we can have a sense of control when we set intention. Um, about things that we want to experience, but what happens when experience hits us?
Yeah.
And we're forced like
Yeah.
intention, quantum energy, go, like how do we take those practices to move through those stages so that we can be back, well, I won't say back, but just be at a better version of ourselves, come to the
Yeah.
other side of it.
Well, I mean, as someone who has experienced a tremendous amount, not just with the loss of my son, but before that, the
Yeah.
loss of my, mother, my father, my spirit mother, who in some ways was
Mhm.
more of a mother than my mother. There've been so much loss, I would say, over the past 5 to 10 years,
Mhm.
culminating in the hugest loss that anyone can imagine when my 16-year-old was murdered a year ago, I guess.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I can say, well, I would say two key things that I have learned through all of this, on a whole different level than I understood intellectually before, which is, first of all, those things that break us apart on a certain level. I just know this in every cell of my body through my own experience and through the experiences I've shared with so many others or that they've shared with me, that
Mhm.
everything, even those hardest, darkest nights of the soul, are for us in the end, that
Mhm.
we break apart so that we can break open, so
Mm.
that we can let
Mhm.
go of, like, there's no way I would have gotten to this point of joy and bliss and peace and connection if I hadn't have been, I just wouldn't have done it. I would have stayed too much of a pleaser. I would have stayed too much of a control freak until
Mhm.
everything was broken down and there was like nothing but that mush that the caterpillar becomes before it
Mhm.
reconfigures as a butterfly in the cocoon. You
Yeah.
have to often, many of us, most of us, have to turn to mush before we can really metamorphosize into that
Right.
butterfly, into what we're really meant to be. And so
Yeah.
in many ways, that's what I see grief as. It's turning to mush. Um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
it's allowing you to reconfigure yourself in a way that is in so much more service to your soul, to your purpose, to your happiness, and to the world around you. So
Mhm.
understanding and being open to even those crappiest, most painful experiences, even if you don't understand it now, may not understand it for another 10 years, everything is ultimately for you. And the
Mhm.
second thing has been, in terms of practical healing, and it's the hardest thing when you're in pain. When we
Mhm.
are facing pain, our tendency is to avoid it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
natural, right?
Run, run, run. Yeah.
Yeah, or just distract
Yeah.
ourselves or try to
Yeah.
tap it away or think it away or whatever it
Yeah.
is, which can
Yeah.
be strategies. I'm not like opposed to using those when necessary, but the problem is it stays until you are willing to go through it. You can't go over, under, or around it. And so what
Mhm.
will happen for many of us, and this was certainly true of me with my trauma history and my codependent tendencies and my people-pleasing
Mhm.
tendencies, was I was always up here in my head or out there in the stars. I wasn't really in my body. And to be
Mm.
willing, once and because I learned the hard way, and this was part of what led to quantum love, is when my mom died, who was my biggest, hugest, most horrific loss up until that
Mhm.
point.
Mhm.
Um, she died of what was ultimately breast cancer within a year. And I did all of the bypassing, and I'm going to be very spiritual about this, and I'm going to find meaning in it. And I'm not going to let my, oh no, I have too many things to do to go wallow. And then within a year, I had breast cancer in the same
Wow.
breast that she did. And I got, I had to stop my life and go through chemo and mastectomy and everything else. And so when I went through the loss of my son, the first thing that became very clear to me is that I want to live. Not only do I need to live for my other children, my husband, but I really want to live. Life is a freaking gift. And the fact that I get to be here in this body is astounding. I mean, it's a miracle that any of us are here.
Yeah.
That sperm, that egg, and like just the fact that we exist is a miracle, right? And so I was very, very clear that I wanted to live. And I knew that I remember going to my husband, I don't think it was even a week after our son died. And I just said, I feel horrible doing this. I know you need me right now. But if I don't leave and go and fully go into my pain, I think I might die. Like I just knew. And I went out into the redwoods with a very dear friend who is like a master at holding space for yucky stuff. And I just wailed and cried and went deep, deep, deep into the pain. And what I knew intellectually from the little bit I dabbled before is that the fear is if I let myself feel the pain or the sadness or the loss or whatever that is that we're feeling, that it will take me over. There's a fear of like losing control and staying stuck there. And in fact, the opposite is true. If you allow yourself to drop into the full depth of what you're feeling, a real feeling only takes about 30 seconds to 2 minutes to pass through you. And then you're lighter and freer. And it doesn't mean you never have a feeling again. It just means the pressure valve has been released and you're not going to explode and you're that much lighter. And I went into an intensive week of that. And then ever since then, in the beginning, it was several times a day. And then it went to once a day. And now it's like every other day, every 3 days, I just sit with myself. Cause now, a year out, I'm not walking around with it right behind my eyes, ready to explode, So I just get quiet and I scan my body with the intention of being with myself. Very often tears will want to come, or I'll want to scream into a pillow, or I'll want to beat the crap out of a bunch of pillows with a baseball bat, or whatever it is that I'm feeling. I will physically release it from my body. And then it's amazing, the healing. Like I talk to people all the time who are 10 years out and can't even function. I still can't walk past my son 17 years after he died, and there's no judgment there, but it breaks my heart that they're still so stuck because they've never been
housing
willing.
that grief, housing the pain.
They've never been willing to release it.
Yeah. I can tell you with certainty that was a gift to that I gave myself when my father passed, was to feel it and to fall into the pain and to cry it out and to scream it out and to not try to be the bigger person, be the human person and just and on the other side of it.
Not just once, many times.
Yeah, all the time. When it hit, I let it hit. I didn't hold it back. I'd be on a podcast. I'm sorry, here it's coming, and I would tell people it's coming. It's because I wanted to be human to myself. And I felt like I would be the only person that would do that. No one else can do it for me. I had to be the one to steward it. And I think that was a better gift that I hope that people can take from this, is that if it is the loss of a job, if it is the loss of a friendship, if it is just the state of the world, whatever that grief is, or the thing that you wish that you had, that you're wanting that never came, or the picture changed, that if you give yourself the gift of honesty and feeling like that, it will allow you to see yourself to the other side. Because no one really, literally, like you're saying, your husband couldn't walk you through it, your children, no one else can do it. We have to commit to loving ourselves, and running from pain only means we face it later, if ever. And like you said, I didn't want to. It doesn't go away.
Dis-ease is what disease is. Yeah.
It's poisonous. It's cancer to the body.
It is.
Oh my God, Dr. Laura, this is so good. Okay. I could hold you forever. Clearly there, like this could just go on and on and on. But where is your work now? And where can we dive into experiences with you communally? You mentioned Manifest Mondays. What are some
Yeah.
of the other juices that you're really like brewing right now that you want us all to opt into?
Well, it's been interesting because I just now, I would say over the past month, after a year of grieving and just
Mhm.
healing, I'm stepping up again and have the energy to create, which feels really
Mm.
good.
Yeah.
So I've been doing the podcast. That's been the only thing I've done all year, which has been great and such a joy
Yeah.
to do. And a new episode comes out every week on the language of love. But if you go to, you can follow me. I'm constantly posting videos on social media at Dr. Laura Berman on all platforms. You'll see me moving fear or sadness or dancing in the rain or whatever it is to model sort of being in your body and being present and healing as well as building, better relationships. So I'm always giving tips there. And yes, the Manifestation Mondays is the first Monday of every month we meet. And that link is there on my homepage of drlauraberman.com. It's also, I think, in the bio on social media. And I'm working. I have some other projects in the works, but it's probably going to be several months before
Okay.
those come to fruition. But for right now, it's the podcast, it's social media, it's Manifestation Mondays. Those would be
Mhm.
the three biggies.
Yeah, those alone will keep us busy. Those will keep us active and those will keep
Yeah.
us plugged in. And when those new projects are ready, we'd love to have you come back and share with us what you're working on and how we can opt into everything that you're doing. I want to personally thank you because, again, your candid nature, your honesty, and your desire to continue to serve others with your story has done a lot for me personally. It's been
Aw,
a gift. It's allowed me to open up, some curious parts that I, even the relationship expertise, I read and study and hear and I observe,
mhm.
and it's helped me ask bigger questions, which has allowed me to walk into more abundance. And I know that it's because I'm, really respectful of the work, and I understand that it does take us higher. So
It
my job,
does.
my role is to help other people get as high and as far and as great as they can get if I just put all the tools and all the people, and you've been one for me. So I want to make sure
Aw, thank
that
you.
women around the world have access to understand your work and understand you and see the authenticity that lies behind everything you do. So thank you so much for being with us today.
Aw, thank you for having me and for
My
joining
pleasure.
me in the journey.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you. All right, great girlfriends. Did you enjoy this week's episode of the podcast? If so, would you please give us your amazing review on iTunes? Every single review helps another great girlfriend get plugged into the podcast and the community. Speaking of community, make sure you join our Facebook group at The Great Girlfriends. Follow us on Instagram at The Great Girlfriends and on Twitter at _great GFS. I'm Sibylla Muti and I'm out. Peace.